Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Only Negotiations in the News. And we've got some updates we're going to go over today and also talk about something new in the T-Mobile pricing plan. So with that, Josh, Gerry, thank you for making time for this. Um,
Sure.
why don't we hit it off with the Iran negotiation saga that seemed to continue and start and stop and start and stop and start and start and stop.
Boy, this is one thing. A couple days ago you'd say one thing, and then whatever you said was just made moot by some, event that just came out of the blue. Like with Trump now, a couple days ago, we're gonna blast these guys to kingdom come, and now it's like, oh, we're holding off. We're negotiating, and then the other side said, no, 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 we're not negotiating. So.
We're not negotiating. How can one side say we are and the other side say we're not? I mean, I get it. So part of the play for me is them trying to make him look crazy.
Yeah.
They really could be. All they have to do is just let him do his thing. But when he comes out and says we're in talks, we're pausing because we're in talks, and the other side says, well, we don't know what you're talking about. We're not in talks.
Mhm.
I think Iran's got a problem inside their own leadership. There's probably two different groups, the IRGC and whatever the other group is called, a little bit more moderate people, I think are kind of
Well,
battling it out
could it
amongst
be that there's
themselves.
there's stuff that's in a time delay? Nothing's in real time because especially when it's through a third party, when it's through a third country and people, we're so used to our phones and we're real time, but we're really not diplomatically. And this I'm a neophyte when it comes to diplomatic communications, but my assumption here is they're much more formal in person, and then someone has to take the meeting notes and digest the meeting notes, and it has to go through the intelligence community. So there's a delay that happens in diplomatic communications that may not happen on the commercial side. Can either of you talk to that?
I mean, I can speak to a little bit, and it's been, some of my experiences have really been more track two, but the track two feeds into track one, right? So the unofficial
I don't know what
diplomacy.
track two and track one is
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't
so
either.
so so track one is the official governmental diplomacy track. Then
okay.
you have track two folks like myself who do what we would call unofficial diplomacy. So we're working with parties, either officially or unofficially, behind the scenes, typically don't draw much attention to what we're doing. The whole idea is to take the constraints of the governmental dimension out of this, bring people together who might maybe are um, government officials, but more often than not, they're people who have the ear of the prime minister or the president, or they're folks like that. Okay, so like the last time I did this, I won't go into the details because I don't think it'd be appropriate, but we had like former foreign ministers that were part of the conversation. We had prominent media members who had the ear of the prime minister or the president, things like that. And the idea with track two diplomacy is to feed creative options and solutions into the official track, saying, hey, we think some of these things may be possible. There's a whole thing called multi-track diplomacy that was created by a guy named John McDonald many years ago, and he actually identified a number of other tracks, like religious leaders formed a track, and the UN was track one and a half because it fell sort of between the governmental and the unofficial pieces, things like
Yeah.
that. So
So when the Pope comments on something, and then there's the public, and then there's the back channel,
right.
right?
And
Okay.
and right. So the thing is that um, the way in which this is playing out is really antithetical to everything I've ever learned about how you do all of this. Um, it really is. I mean, the most important thing is that you don't make public comments because they effectively box you in.
How can a
Um,
politician stop themselves from making a public comment?
Well, I mean, I do actually think if you look at disciplined leaders, they will find a way of saying, yes, there's progress. We're not going to talk about it here because it
Can
will
we use
create.
maybe an Obama was, if you recall, there was a
Sure.
time he was running for reelection and he
Yeah.
said something about tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after the election or something
Yeah.
along those
I
lines.
remember
Is
that.
that an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah. It's basically finding ways not to respond in public because there's so many ways in which messages can be misinterpreted, misunderstood, etc. And so I think this is a classic case of, you know, negotiating in public, which we always say don't do. Right? So, and even if you take the JCPOA, which took almost 2 years to negotiate, um, most people didn't hear much until there was actually a deal, right? And that's usually how it's done, is that you bring parties together from different vantage points, different places, oftentimes bringing people, we used to do this a good bit. Um, there was a guy named Herb Kelman who was a really well-known kind of social psychologist, and he used to do problem-solving workshops, is what they were called. And we would bring people to Harvard, like Israelis and Palestinians or Catholics and Protestants from Northern Ireland. I had a number of opportunities to do many sessions with him on a couple of different conflicts. And the idea was get them out of the conflict area, bring them to a place for 4 or 5 days, and talk about the core issues and be able to take those back to, people in the official track and say,
To
hey,
go to the balcony
yeah,
physically.
generally. Physically, yes. And I think because there's a lot less pressure when you take people out of the conflict zone, they feel like they can actually think and do things differently.
Like they're on
I
the
think
beach.
they're on the beach or wherever they might be. They might be in Oslo walking in the woods, right? Like that kind of notion is a very common approach to all of this, right? So I guess the overarching point is they're really, I think on our last call, I mentioned that there was a book that was written about one of the Camp David processes back in the like 1970s between the Egyptians and the Israelis. Um, and the book was called A Dialogue of the Deaf because they were talking past each other, um, largely due to culture. And but in this instance, like I think Trump desperately wants to be seen as the ultimate deal maker. He wants the Nobel Prize more than anything, but he doesn't understand how you actually get it because if you're going to bomb people, they're not going to
It's
give you
not
the
like
Nobel.
FIFA.
It's
Here
not
is
like
the first
FIFA.
the first FIFA Peace Prize award. Not that
So
easy.
he just like, I mean, listen, I think we all have the experience when you meet people, right? And you tell them what you do, right? People often want to tell you a story of how great a negotiator they are. It's just like one of those kinds of things, right? Where they love to sort of talk about it. And I think Trump is like the ultimate when it comes to that. Like he desperately wants to be seen as the greatest deal maker ever. And so this idea of ratcheting up pressure, like we all know his style is one that he talks about this all the time about being unpredictable and keeping the other side guessing. There's a difference between being unpredictable and being irrational and being, um, throwing so many things out there that like nobody has any idea what you're doing anymore. Like
Yeah.
these, and Jerry, you just wrote about these. Like the threat, like if you're not making a credible threat, then the threat goes away very quickly. And I think the Iranians, if I'm reading the tea leaves from an Iranian point of view, they're looking at this and they're saying all we have to do is dangle the promise of talks or something like that, and he's going to pull back because he knows that militarily he's you know Trump is one of those kind of guys like he'll take an action but like he's never gone to a place where he's obliterated despite the fact that he would like to say that he's never gone to that place,
Right.
right?
So I'm in his first term. It was within the first 60 days, I think. He was the first one to drop the Moab, the mother of all bombs.
Yeah,
Right. But
right,
he dropped it like in the middle of the Syrian desert. So
correct,
it's not like he took out like
no,
Nagasaki. He didn't
right,
go to that level. But as soon as he did it, at the time I went, he's positioning himself as the silver or lead. Don't make me drop big bombs because I will. So you better take the olive branch when I offer it.
right. And in that particular scenario, right, nothing else came of it. Like there was
Right.
there was nothing that really transpired from that. And I think similarly here, I think Trump he's gotten to a place where he's used threats so often and then pulled back or not followed through for whatever reason that I think the Iranians are looking at it and simply saying, we don't believe a word this guy says. And so we want to make him perhaps even look irrational or more irrational to the rest of the world
Yeah,
by
I don't
sort
think
of
that's not really a stretch because the rest of the world already feels that way. We saw with the World Cup, right? All the Europeans who came over, they're like, wait a minute, America isn't as bad as we've been told.
right. Yeah.
You guys have Costco.
But
Uh,
I just think it's one of those kinds of things where, you know, the strategy or the approach is one of pressure and then, trying to get people back to the table. But when you
so
keep doing it over and over again and it doesn't really work and it's not yielding any benefits, and in fact, what it's actually demonstrating is that you really don't have much control over what's going on. To me, that's what it's saying is you're trying to force this, and the minute the Iranians give you some sense maybe they're willing to talk, you fully pull back. And it just doesn't appear like from a strategic approach to negotiation that you're actually leveraging any kind of power here. Like it
yeah,
feels actually like you're losing your power because you're making these hollow threats. Again, back to Gerry's recent, post on LinkedIn about, a threat needs to be if you're going to do it. And I remember Obama got killed because he didn't create a red line in Syria with the chemical weapons.
right.
And
And he wore
right.
the brown suit.
And he wore the light brown suit, exactly. Right. And I think here you're seeing an effort to try to use force and it's not working. And all it's actually doing is making things look chaotic.
Yeah.
And like no one has any kind of handle on the process, at least on the US end. It doesn't feel like they're able to drive the process in a productive way.
Yeah.
It's all like from an outside observer, like I've had people say to me, this must be driving you mad because you know a bit about negotiation. And I'm watching this and I don't know much about negotiation at all. And it's driving me crazy.
Right. But see,
You
that's
know,
where I would tell. Go ahead, Gerry.
I had a thought because I'm trying to figure, like we're all trying to figure out, get in Trump's mind, these people's minds, and I wonder, I can't say it that it's for sure. I just wonder if Trump is saying, okay, I'm going to bomb them for a while, and then they're going to say, okay, we'll come to the table to talk, and he says, okay, I'll stop. Is he, because he's done this a number of times, and is he doing it to placate people, saying, I'm not all about military action. I do want to give, negotiations a chance. So I've really trying. I stopped a bunch of times, and the Iranians have, not come through. So, to kind of polish his image a bit that, I'm not all about bombing everybody, that I am willing to try to negotiate and avoid some of this. Just a second side note, Joshua, you're making me think the other cases we might be able to look at today, the NIL, Major League Baseball, this, and Trump has has interjected himself into these things where he didn't really need to. He just decided to step in and force something or make an opinion. So
Right.
I don't think he has with T-Mobile yet, but I wouldn't be surprised
But
if
see,
he
that's
comes
where
out.
he's the classic, the frog and the scorpion trying to cross the river, and the scorpion says, "Put me on your back," and the frog says, "You're out of your mind."
Right.
Scump is the scorpion. He is what he is. He can't help himself in this.
I
So
think
where I
that's
was
right.
going
And
is,
then, he just called the Iranians within the last hour unbelievably duplicitous, because he said that they agreed to talks and now they're saying they didn't. Again, it makes it look ridiculous because he's seemingly trying to pin them down to engage, and like they are clearly looking at him and watching what he's doing and saying, first of all, we don't even know if this guy's going to live up to anything that he agrees to. I mean, I think that's one of the problems, right? When you um, do what he's did on other fronts, your word doesn't carry a lot, right? People become incredibly skeptical of whether you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do or not, right? I
I
mean,
still remember a commercial negotiation I was involved with. Um, Richard Twilley's guy's name, and in the negotiation, it was really tense. It happened to be a Sprint deal, and Richard said, "I will put that on my letterhead." And I thought, wow, that's really powerful. Here's a guy saying, I'm going to, on the letterhead of my company, but it's not contractually, but
Mhm.
write his name, his signature, and
Right.
it meant so much to him to say that he conveyed to me, Richard's going to follow through on this. So
Mhm.
shout out to Richard out there, and yeah, I think there is some of that. Is he going to come through or not? Um, that, there's something that hit my brain is anytime you're negotiating, the harder somebody works to create leverage or to put tactics into play, they're trying to create leverage. In my brain, I'm always trying to get on the other side sheet of paper. And if the other side is working really hard on the deal, my brain says they must really need this deal. Otherwise, why would they put all that effort in? So it's almost counterintuitive. The more leverage the other side is perceived to have, maybe they don't have any. And Trump wants the deal, and Iran can wait him out
Well,
until
yeah,
Saudi gets some nuclear enrichment. How how do you
I
feel about
think that,
that?
well, I think generally, I think that's right. And it's interesting because he continues to say the Saudis keep coming back to me and they want a deal so badly. It's like,
The
well,
the Saudis do, or that
oh, I'm
Saudis
sorry,
saying
not the
Iran does?
Saudis, the Iranians, that Trump keeps saying the Iranians want a deal so
Yeah.
badly.
Yeah,
And it makes you immediately think, probably not. It's probably you that wants the deal so badly because you're the one who's coming out and saying all these things
right.
and saying how, they want to get back to the table and all of this. And the Iranians aren't saying anything. They're simply sitting there and just letting him go because they know, certainly from a public relations global standpoint, that it's probably helping their cause to just let him continue to kind of do the back and forth with himself. Sometimes I think in negotiation, um, it's far better to just let the other side, if they're on a roll and it's not being very productive, to
Right.
just let them go,
Right.
and
However, I
not.
will say this culturally, it's a very macho, patriarchal society.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's hard for us men to sit back and let somebody go. Sometimes we want to say, "Oh yeah, I'll fight you back." So
Right.
I'll give them credit if that is their plan indeed to just let him go. Having the discipline to override your biological senses and to want to get in there and mix it up and want to look tough too.
Yeah.
To be like, no, 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 no. We've got to let him go.
Well,
Well, the other thing is with
yeah.
the
Yeah.
IRGC, they'll fight to the death. Their lives aren't
They're
that
martyred.
important. Yeah, they're martyrs. They're going to get some big reward. So we're fighting against, I don't want to say they're irrational because in their minds that's very irrational. But
Right.
these are people that they'll all go to their death probably before they, capitulate to anybody, especially
Hey,
Trump. So,
they're not far off from Afghanistan. God bless
no,
those people. Holy cow. Beat back the Russians, finally
yeah,
beat the US.
right,
In that part of the world, they've got people who will live in caves and
yeah,
be happy about it.
yeah.
I'm sure they're
Well,
happier in air conditioning and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
Well, but I do think I do think that's right, that in general, like, I think they look at this and they actually continue to believe that they are the ones that have, the Iranians are the ones who have the leverage here.
Yeah.
And yes, Trump can inflict pain, which he has, but it's not getting him anywhere. It's again, like in Syria, there was no real strategy to that. There was bombing. Well, okay. I mean, like, and I don't mean to sound callous at all, but like, okay, so you bombed people. Now what? Like, what is the plan? Like, how are you leveraging that kind of,
you bomb
those
people
kind
who have had chemical weapons used on them. Like this did, they,
right,
they weren't living our cush lives and all of a sudden had a firecracker go off.
right.
This is
But,
these are
and
people who
I also think like with what's transpired with the Iranians, yes, they've definitely suffered some pain without question as a result of all of this. But I think that they realize that the US doesn't have the stomach to send in ground troops, um, or at least right now they don't. They also realize that the Strait of Hormuz has become the issue. So all of the things that, in so many ways, all of the things that they care about are off the table right now.
yeah.
Like they're not even the nuclear program's not even being discussed because Trump is so fixated on we've got to get the strait open. Um, that's
I
been
still
pushed
don't
to the back.
understand how other countries, you don't have to take a side and you can be anti-American, but to send in your naval fleet and say, hey, listen, just so you know, Iran, our ship's getting through, or we're going to join it, we're going to protect it somehow, some way. But you're not just going to indiscriminately take out any tanker that you want. You know, the Greek ships are getting through. We're the Greek Navy. We're here to protect them. We're the Germans. We're here to protect them. We're Brazil. We're Argentina. Our ships are getting through. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens. Not that you can do a lot against the drone attacks and things like that. But I'm a little surprised that other nations haven't at least militarily come to the forefront and said, we're going to participate to protect our ship. Is that, have you heard anybody doing that?
No, I
I
haven't. And
have no.
I think my perspective is that I think those other countries would rather not be in the middle of this.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, true.
The US has their blockade on one side, right? And the Iranians have, you know, their attacks on others who are trying to do this. And so in other countries' mind, they're like, look, for the time being, let's find alternatives. Let's find alternative ways of meeting our needs, a la China or whatever. And then, you know, it's not worth it for us to be putting our ships and our people in harm's way.
Yeah.
I think that's the calculus. And there's the hope that this will, at a certain point, you know, I think countries know how much Trump cares about resources and about the global economy and things like that.
And
And that
election.
and
We're
election,
months
absolutely.
away from the
Right.
midterms.
Right. And
Oh, if he could
so,
just deliver it, if he could just deliver peace before the midterms, that would really swing things, and the Iranians know it.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so do other people. And again, you know, the US, you know, if we just look at this from a geopolitical point of view, you know, the fact that we have elections every 4 years and we're working with and or opposed to countries who don't, they have a big advantage because they can play the longer game. And Trump has proven that he will react and respond to economic factors that might be getting in the way, right? And you know, I mean, I just heard a BBC report talking about the U.S. reserves, oil reserves, and how, you know, we're really getting to a place where um, you know, that's slowly but surely, you know, becoming um, or being put into jeopardy,
And
right? And
military
so,
reserves. Just
yeah,
how
and
many
so,
bombs do we actually have?
right. So all of those things are coming together. And so when Trump sits there and says, we have all the time in the world, you don't. And people know you don't. And I think that's the thing is, A, he can't help himself, and B, every time he says something, I think the Iranians sit there and they go, okay, we'll just chalk that up and figure out how to use that as part of this process, right? And so, you know, they're clearly, you know, it's not as if this isn't harming them. It is for sure. But I think I would be willing to put my chips on the table that they thought about the longer term strategy far more than Trump did. I think Trump
Oh, yeah.
thought Maduro, Venezuela, we go in quick, we get the win. I'm a genius, I'm brilliant, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, anybody who's watched Iran for a long time should know that that was never going to happen here.
Right.
So
All right.
I just think that this will never go anywhere from a negotiation point of view unless they stop talking about all of these things out in public. And the problem is I don't see Trump being capable of doing that. So this just feels like a negotiation that is going to be an endless series of fits and starts.
Yeah. Do you think the Iranians are concerned about Saudi getting potentially enriched material?
Um, I would think it would concern them, but I don't.
It should.
I mean, it should, but I again, you know,
Well,
the
if it will
convers
never be used, then
right.
let's just pretend that there's only two countries on the planet, it's Iran and Saudi. And if you're not going to use it, then enrich all you want. I don't care. A Muslim, is a Muslim really going to use it on another Muslim? And I get the Sunni Shia thing, but are they really going to use nuclear in that context? I
I
highly
don't
doubt.
know, but I think the conversation has also been with the United States that this is going to be for peaceful purposes. And so if the
Well,
Saudis turned
you can
around,
say until otherwise.
well, you
Yeah,
can, but I think it's one thing to say, you know, hey, we're going to give Saudi nuclear capability to defend themselves, right? And that's not what's being said. And, again, like from a negotiation point of view with this, right? Apparently Trump and the Saudis agree. And then after the agreement, Trump comes out and says, oh, by the way, you need to adhere to the Abraham Accords. Like, right? I mean, again, from a negotiation point of view, exactly what you're taught not to do.
Yeah.
So, I
But
mean,
all the rules are
think,
out the window.
yeah, but I also think the other part of this is that, yes, I think, look, any new nuclear power should be concerning. Um, but I do think there's a way in which you could leverage it, but it just, as we've talked about, you might be able to destroy somebody's current capacity, but if you have the knowledge and the know-how, then it doesn't matter. Like they'll find a way if they really want to.
I can't believe that the United States could do in the 40s and 50s, and other countries haven't been able to more countries haven't been able to replicate that technology. We walk around with more computing power than it took to put a man on the moon in 1969 in our pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So it is surprising that more countries haven't proliferated nuclear weaponry.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would tend to agree. I do think, back in the day when there was the actual nuclear non-proliferation treaty that limited countries from doing so, and people signed on voluntarily because they knew the potential destruction that was possible. I mean, that certainly froze things. But, I think one of the challenges, and I hear this a lot from people around the world, is, well, who gets to decide who gets to be nuclear and who doesn't? Right? Like,
Exactly. Everyone's a sovereign nation, and
yeah.
But then that becomes a negotiation. If you get it, if you threaten to get it, what will we give you to prevent you from having it? Give us money, give us resources, give us some political clout, a seat at the table. And then once you have it, are you going to use it or not? Look at the whole India-Pakistan, right? They both have it, and things flare up, and neither one's used it yet.
Yeah.
And I read an article years ago on how it was really important for the Russians to have nuclear capability similar to the U.S. at the time, because if the U.S. was the only one that had it, the fear mongering and the likelihood of war breaking out because the Soviets felt they were at a disadvantage. So by them having it, tensions actually were reduced, even though they both had the opportunity to blow each other up.
Yeah, I mean,
the dynamics of it are interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole mutually assured destruction, right? That that in essence, if I know that there are deterrent capabilities out there, then I'm not going to use it.
But if that's the case, then since Israel has it, doesn't Iran have I'll use the word fair, a fair case that says, listen, Israel's got it. They've attacked us. They're not going to mention they attacked them back, but can't they make the case to a UN or anybody who's a third party that doesn't have a dog in the hunt that, hey, listen, our enemy has nukes, we need them too?
I mean,
I think Israel has never. Well, it's interesting. Nobody has ever used nuclear weapons except the United States in World War II. The U.S. didn't use it in Vietnam. The Soviets didn't use it in Afghanistan. And Israel never went after Iran with nuclear bombs. Even Golda Meir didn't use nuclear weapons when the two Egyptian armies were closing in. So I think rational people know, boy, you unleashed the nuclear weapons.
And Iran has made threats that we will, when we get them, we will wipe you off the face of the planet. Now, I would argue, I would hope anyway, that those are just Trump level statements to rally their troops. Look how strong we are. We're not going to tolerate, Israel.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid with Iran, they would not look at it that way and say, hey, we got the nuclear weapons. We hate Israel. We don't care about our own lives. It's a religious thing. and unleash them. And even if every Iranian dies, it's like, well, we've done our thing against the great Satan Israel, and we're going to heaven or something. That would be my concern.
It feels like it's more threatening in that context. Yeah, Jerry, I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I mean, the other piece of it is, the Israelis, I mean, unofficially have nuclear capability. Like there are declared countries that have nuclear capability. I mean,
Okay.
it's the worst kept secret on the planet, right? Um, but I do think, I mean, look, with the Ukrainian and Russian war, I mean, Putin was beginning to sort of get a bit desperate, right? And began to talk about using tactical nuclear weapons as part of this. Now,
But
again,
again, is he going to do it?
who knows? I mean, look, I think anytime people get backed into a corner and see this as an existential threat, to Jerry's point, they're going to say, do we sit here and wait till they destroy us or do we destroy them? Right. And I think, for a long time, you had some form of a system in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and things like that. The countries followed for many years. But but again, it was, the countries that already had nuclear capability that were part of the drafters of this that sort of said, we get this status and you don't.
Yeah.
And to say to other countries, sign on, kind of thing. And but
Hey, here's something I don't know. I've been following get his. It's John Kiriasu, ex-CIA. He was the guy who turned in Bush and Cheney for torture programs. He was a
okay.
whistleblower in that context, but he was an analyst at the CIA. Knows a lot, tells a lot of great stories
Mhm.
um, about analyzing and what's going on in other countries. And how much do we really know? How much are we spying on everybody else to know what's real and what's not? Do you guys know that?
How
You know,
much
could
are we?
could a smaller country go out and develop a nuclear program without our intelligence agencies knowing exactly where they are in the process?
I would think that it would very much depend on what country we're talking about
I mean,
because
was it like a
I don't
Republic
think
of
there's any.
Congo, just
Well, I think countries that are a quote unquote threat to the United States are being watched very carefully.
yeah,
I think others who are not deemed as a threat are probably not being watched as much. And so, could those folks, uh, fast track it? Sure. Um,
yeah,
I mean, it's a little bit like, it's a little bit like North Korea, right? I mean, North Korea, they've put a lot of their resources into it, and Kim Jong-un clearly sees and ties his ability to have nuclear capability to his survival. Like that's
true.
how he sees it. So I think it's, I mean, and maybe we sort of put a bow on this conversation for now.
Yeah.
But from a negotiation point of view, I think we come back around to that. I think it just becomes something that it's very hard to see where this is going to go. And it's certainly not hard to see them reaching a ceasefire and some kind of an agreement on the Strait of Hormuz at some point.
Do you
But
see a Rocket Man moment where, I'm sorry, de-escalating from Rocket Man? Do you see Trump and IRC leadership getting together in Jordan and shaking hands?
that
Boy,
feels
that's a
like a bit
tough
of a,
one, Mike.
yeah,
Got a
I
Camp
think that
David
feels.
moment?
I mean, it feels like, I mean, possibly, I think Trump does pride himself on this notion of I'll talk to anybody and I'll do anything, et
I do
cetera.
want to give him
But
credit on that. I
yeah,
understand
well,
the concept of don't negotiate with terrorists, but we're back channeling negotiations all the time with terrorist groups. So if you're going to
correct.
do it, at least stand in front of the person, look them in the eye, mano a mano, that macho thing. But at least be there, be present.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it conveys a level. I mean, the concern had always been that it conveys a level of sort of acceptance of the reality, right? That people didn't want to do. They
Yeah,
didn't want to accept certain notions as a fait accompli, and they didn't want to, I mean, when the United States sits down with a party to negotiate, there's a level of credibility that is bestowed on that other side. There is,
true.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's an element of that. Now, again, maybe there's a barrier and a taboo that's been broken. I mean, for years when you listen to people like spokespeople at the State Department or whatever it might be saying, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Anybody that's been in this world for any period of time knows that's not true. It just means that you're not talking to them directly, but you're talking through, two or three interlocutors who are delivering messages, and that's how we end up getting hostages freed from Iran or Syria or whatever it might be, because you're talking to them. So, to be very frank, like I think
Yeah.
there's an element of just saying, listen, of course we're talking to people. Like this is how this works. There's no other way around it.
I just related back to the commercial side. I was having a discussion with a guy from Switzerland who apparently has a no negotiating with terrorist policies, even though they're the neutral ground when it comes to kidnapping.
Mhm.
Apparently they're that's like official policy. But it was like, yeah, they do. They pay to get their citizens out. But if it gets out that Switzerland will negotiate, will pay for their citizens, then every Swiss person on the planet becomes a target to every bad organization on the planet. So they just want to keep it on the down low. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But they were from Switzerland, and
I
I
mean,
give Swiss a lot of
that's
credit.
the old that's the logic is if we sit down and negotiate with you, and then then you're going to just keep taking people. Whether that's true or not in practice, I would argue it may not be that stark.
Yeah, got it.
You
Well,
know,
listen, let's put a bow on this one and move on. We got about 15 minutes left. Jerry, you mentioned T-Mobile. So for those who
Yeah.
don't know, I am a T-Mobile customer. I am impacted by this. It's not a lot, but I was guaranteed pricing for life, locked in, and I did that 10 years ago. No, 2010. So long time now, 2016. My dad just pointed out on his birthday that I'm getting gray hair off the side. I see that as
Welcome to the club.
yeah, exactly. I've actually aspired to. I get to be the graybeard in the room versus the crazy young guy. Anyway, and they've came out and they're going to wipe out those legacy plans and they put in a new plan in place. And you do get more from a technology perspective. Although I would argue a lot of times technology gets cheaper and cheaper for the company, not more and more expensive. But regardless, and it's going to be, I think they capped it at $6 per month per line. But if you have 4 lines, $25 a month, it's going to tap into people's pockets. For me, the larger thing is when a company makes a promise to people, and it's shocking, pricing for life. Oof, that's big. They were the uncarrier, and then
Mhm.
comes in and says, "Yeah, we're going to move that out of the way." What happens to customer loyalty? Um, Class action suit. It's very simple. I have it. Pricing for life. Here it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be easy case to win. So why do they do it if it seems like such an easy case?
Well, I'd like to know, but I think the negotiation's going to be, it seems like from the article, there was a lot of people, the Justice Department was going after them, and then there was state AGs, and
Right?
that there's going to be T-Mobile's going to be spending a lot of time in
A lot of time, a lot of money,
legal action.
and
Yep,
it still
yep,
feels like a loser.
yeah. I don't, I don't know why they're bothering with it. They had to just declare victory and go home and say, everybody have your, back to the old plan and,
Yeah.
keep renewing. But
I mean, is it one of those cases like the peril that I might draw, and you can tell me, and I am a T-Mobile customer as well,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
but
Did you get the notice like 2 months ago that was
I
happening?
don't actually think I did, which is maybe problematic.
Okay. Well, you could be on one of the plans that wasn't already locked in for life, so it didn't
It could be,
impact
yeah.
you as much. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I just think about, for example, and from a negotiation point of view, I'll just, draw this parallel to Saturn, right? So Saturn, remember when they came out years ago, their big thing was we don't negotiate over price, right? And at first people were like, oh, that's great. I hate negotiating with car companies, blah, blah, blah. And then they realized, wait a minute, the car company's setting the price, so they're certainly not going to be doing it in my favor, right? And so that notion became more of a gimmick that failed pretty quickly than actually something, which is why I think to a degree Saturn no longer exists,
So
right?
so Joshua, I was at General Motors when this was going on.
Uh-huh, okay.
And the reason, and you're absolutely right, the reason they came out, there was a marketing study done, what people hate about buying a
Right.
car. I hate
Yeah.
negotiating. Sorry, people, if you
Yeah.
negotiate better, you get better. Anyway, and by the way, you're not going to beat a car dealer because they get trained, they probably take continuing education at least once a year. They probably have a once a month get together with the sales staff. They read all the same information that every consumer on the planet does, and some of that information is planted by them. So you won't beat a car dealer in a negotiation. You can get a better deal than your neighbor if you're willing to negotiate. But I'm on a tangent. The point is,
Yeah.
they absolutely said the number one reason was people hate negotiating. So Saturn implemented the no negotiation. This is the price,
Right.
and sales quickly started to fall because the marketing study said people knew they weren't getting a better deal, weren't getting a good deal. They were getting a deal that was in GM's favor. So then that pricing policy went away.
Right. And I just wonder, right? Like these are sort of gimmicky things, right? Like the price for life kind of thing is a way of saying, look, we know people, I'm guessing in a similar kind of way, right? People probably said, yeah, I'll lock in at this price, but there's very little that might stop you from increasing the price over time, right? Like what recourse do I have if you decide to increase my bill by 5% a year or 8% a year or
Yeah.
10% a year, right? So it probably addressed a fear. I think it's interesting because I think from a negotiation point of view, that's sort of a quick fix to a complicated problem. And we know in negotiation that those things rarely work,
Yeah.
that
Or
they
is this a new
typically,
Coke? Or do they had to know that this was going to be a kerfuffle and that everybody was going to say, you're out of your mind, and we're leaving, we're going to Verizon, we're going to go to AT&T from the consumer level. And they had to know the state AGs were going to, they saw it as a, easy win to deliver back to consumer protection agencies, but they did it anyway.
I think, I mean, we are making an assumption that they thought through the consequences of all of this, right?
You're right.
And
I am
and
guilty of assuming that people are rational and thoughtful. Yes. Okay.
but again, like there's a great quote. Maybe I've shared it with you guys. I don't remember. But basically, the quote is, and I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on who said it. So this is really powerful stuff I'm sharing with you guys at the moment. But the quote is basically for every complicated problem, there's a simple solution that's wrong. And we used this before to talk about Trump's approach
That's
to a
wrong.
lot of
I thought you were
stuff.
going to end it at simple solution.
That's
No,
what I thought.
no.
Occam's razor, I thought.
Yeah, no, but what it is basically that companies and governments and others say, here's the problem. We know it's complicated. Instead of coming up with a solution that's actually going to address the complexity involved, right? Like take the immigration problem in the United States. It's a complicated problem. It could be solved, right? But nobody wants to make the difficult choices around that. So instead, we find these band-aids. We find simple solutions that sound great, like build a giant wall or do this or do that, right?
Right.
And it doesn't solve the problem.
I countered that we've had comprehensive immigration reform 4 times at least since Reagan was in office.
Yeah,
I stopped counting. So we've had it. It just
right.
never solves the problem.
Right. That's right. And that is the issue. And I'm just wondering, for example, right, if we go back to T-Mobile, did they take the same idea and say, okay, well, people probably are worried about this increase, so we'll just offer this. Um, and like, maybe people will remember it, maybe people will forget it. Who knows? Like, I just wonder whether they really thought through like all of the ramifications of doing something like that. I guess that's my question is it sounds like a good thing. People are like excited about it, right? And then as time wears on, you're like, wait a minute, maybe they didn't factor in for inflation in the way that it's happening right now, right? So we're now losing money as a result of this approach. And so we didn't think far enough out. Is this actually a good idea or not
Yeah.
over the long term?
I'd say that that occurred. They didn't think it through well enough. That'd be my just on the surface from what I read. I don't think they
It's a
thought
little
this
bit
through.
it's a little bit like politicians, right? Politicians, because they have to get reelected, they want to have a solution that will deal with the near term. And I've
And
worked with
not
a
long
lot of
term.
different governmental officials at the federal, state, local level. And more often than not, when I say, hey, you really need a long-term approach to dealing with this problem, they'll say, yeah, but I'm going to get I need to get reelected in the next 2 years. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm like, listen,
Yeah.
do you want to solve the problem or do you want to just put a Band-Aid on it so you can get reelected? And I end up knowing what the answer is for most of them.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Well, I'll put it into commercial context because this story came up recently. Somebody asked me a question. This is how I answered it. Smart people can make simple statements or solutions and be completely wrong. So here's what's going on. When I was at MGM Resorts, Mandalay Bay was going to analyze their player database and try to maximize that. We had 3 different PhD level mathematician actuary companies that we were looking at to try to help us maximize our revenue. So we have this dog and pony show. I'm in purchasing, so we have to have 3 bids, and we have to have them all come in and give presentations. The first group comes in and they said, hey, listen, we said, is there anything outside the scope that you want to tell us? And they said, yeah, our mathematicians found something very interesting. They said, do you know that on a $5,000 plus player per hand, blackjack, the win ratio is abnormally high. We think your dealers are maybe showing a hold card, or they're somehow helping people that spend $5,000 a hand cheat. So you better take a look at that. They leave the room. Bill Hornbuckle, who's now the CEO of MGM, he was the president of Mandalay at the time. He says, Mike, I never want to see him again. I said, why? He said, because when you play $5,000 a hand, you're not drinking, you're not distracted, you're playing by the book. Of course, your win percentage is going to be higher than the average person who's getting drunk and distracted. Got it. Second group comes in. At the end, you have everything you want to tell us? They said, yeah, we found that it was 92% of your profit is from 6% of your players. So we think you should stop marketing collateral to the 94% of people that don't matter and just focus on the 6%. And Bill said, thank you very much. And they left the room and he said, Mike, I never want to see him again. And I said, what? I said, what now? And he said, because people, when the 6%, the people you make your money off of, when Charles Barkley goes all in, he doesn't want to do it in a vacuum. He doesn't want to do it in the private room or in the privacy of his hotel room. He wants 1,000 people around him to go, oh, I saw Charles Barkley go all in. So the other 94% of people are there to make the 6% of the people bet more. And I'm like, wow, you're right. Last group comes in. Is there anything you want to tell us? Nope. They won the business. They kept their mouth shut. They just didn't tell us anything because they didn't make wrong statements. So back to your story on the simple answer can be wrong. The simple statement, which to the average person on the street sounds smart, to an expert is completely wrong. So It happens out there. All right. Listen, let's wrap this up with one thing. We got about 8 minutes left. Let's talk about the MLB situation. And, here we got the Dodgers out there buying more players, trying to, they say buy a championship, and that's not fair. But at the end of the day, ownership is trying to win championships. And we know, for those Yankee fans out there, sometimes having the biggest payroll doesn't produce the championship.
Right.
I'm going to make the argument that when ownership writes the big checks, they're off the hook. It's the easiest thing for management to do, to write big checks, because then the pressure is all on the players to win. And if they lose, the fans don't go, management ownership sucks. They go, those guys are bums.
Right.
So as long as you have a deep enough pocket, writing big checks, you want to do that all day long.
Yeah, right.
Because then you've got no accountability at all. Now, if you're in a big market, Boston, and you lose the free agent and your team loses the World Series, now all of a sudden the fans look at you.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Small markets, and everybody knows small markets, they're not really there to win, not regularly anyway. But so I guess with MLB, you think there's going to be a lockout. I think is what we arrived last time, that the owners will lock out the players. Do you guys know what the percentage of ownership is? Is it a quorum of 70% of owners have to agree, or?
I don't know. I don't know what the percentage is. It's probably, I would imagine it's a quorum, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Um, but it's interesting, Mike, because when you look at quote unquote small market teams in the NFL, right? It's a different orientation altogether. Like Green Bay is a tiny little town of 100,000 people, right? And yet they have one of the more successful NFL franchises in the country, right?
In history.
In history.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
and you say, why? Like,
It's
what's
not a
the
blip.
difference?
Yeah, they
No,
consistently, yeah.
correct. And what's different is the structure that the NFL owners, and again, like I'm going to give them some praise, but like I don't want to, go off the deep end here because they're billionaires who have more money than,
Right.
right? So like let's just put it all into the proper context. But when I was reading more and more about this, about what are some creative solutions to this problem, right? Because the same old thinking is going to get you the same old results. It's going to get you a lockout. It's going to get parties that are going to dig in and say, we want a cap, we don't want a cap. Well, those are
And a
positions.
lockout at a time with declining viewership and declining butts in seats in person.
Right. So you're playing with fire, right? And the big difference, of course, well, one big difference, of course, is that the players union in baseball is the strongest union in professional sports without
Yeah.
question, right? But in the NFL, the owners that could have made more money kind of basically came together and said, listen, for the betterment of the league, for the betterment of everybody, we're going to take more of a collectivist mindset. It doesn't mean they don't make money, but the Cowboys could have easily said, hey, we're not doing that. And they would have been within their rights to do that, but they didn't do that. They basically came back and said, look, if this is going to work. We need a cap. Um, we need to share revenue. We need to do this in a way where, so the bigger teams like the Giants and the Cowboys and the Patriots and whatever were willing to give up a little bit for the betterment of the sport, for the collective notion that we want to put a good product on the field. And I think right now, like, again, as I've heard people talk about it, right, the the Dodgers aren't doing anything that's illegal. And this was the argument that George Steinbrenner used to make years ago when he would do this. He would say, I am playing within the rules. If you don't like the rules, change the rules,
Right.
right? And so now we're talking about, okay, change the rules. And people don't want to change the rules because they're benefiting. Like the Players Association is benefiting. They're making great money and they don't want a cap. And on some level, okay, I guess I understand that. Yeah.
Right.
But again, like
But can
it's
they
just,
bring the floor along and say, listen,
well, I
or
think you
do
have
they not
to.
care?
No, but I think they have to. I don't think you can do this just with a cap. I think you have to have these smaller market teams that say, where the league says you've got to spend at least this amount. And you can't just be pocketing money as an owner of the Rays or the Royals. Like that's not
Like the
okay
Clippers
either.
used to do. They figured out that
Yeah.
you don't have to win games to make money in the NBA.
No, and it's the
Hey,
same in baseball.
let me throw one more context. So we talked about the players union. We've talked about the owners. A lot of these local communities, and here we are, Jerry, back to the NFL and the Bears, have invested a lot of money in the stadiums and
Mhm.
given preferential treatment and
Yeah.
all those kind of things. Do the cities themselves and or the states that are going to collect the tax revenue, how much leverage do they have with their owner for each one to say, hey, listen, you need to get to the table because a lockout's going to hurt the tax revenue at a time when everybody's looking for more money? Can a government entity, not Trump, have a seat at this table to make it work? Or
I
should
think they
they?
should.
I mean,
I
but
think they
Mike, you're
should.
highlighting an important point, which is there are a lot of communities, places where these teams exist that rely heavily on the revenue from these games,
Hey,
right? I
Taylor
mean,
Swift, when she came to town, it was something stupid. It was like a $38 million lift in tax revenues because Taylor Swift sold out the stadiums.
yeah,
I mean, God bless her. You talk about a business person galore.
right. But
Negotiator.
but the thing is, in part, this is where I think the notion of BATNA becomes important here, and we don't really talk about that much in this
Yeah.
context. But But like, and we'll go back to something that you guys were talking about when I joined, which is the Bears, right? The state of Indiana stepped up and said, "Hey, we'll give you guys a better deal to
Yep.
move to Indiana." Well, what does that look like when it comes to baseball, right? Like cities could say to the teams, "Hey, like you guys need to agree to this, or, you know, maybe we'll figure something else out here." I don't know what it would look like, but it's interesting to think because right now, the players are looking at this from what I can tell, and they say we have a good bat now. They're probably wrong about that because if they get locked out, then they're going to sit there and complain and say, you know, the
And
greedy
they have a
owners did
shelf
it.
life. You know,
They
a
do.
Yep.
36-year-old losing the 37th, 38th year.
Absolutely. Right. And the stars, you know, don't have to worry about this. But the average player whose career is 4 to 5, 6 years, maybe, right? They have a lot to lose. And especially those guys who are in their prime, can they afford that? And so, you know, I think there's an interesting sort of conversation. Like, you know, we were talking before, Jerry, you were bringing up the fact that, you know, in Iran, who knows who's really negotiating here, right? I don't know whether there's like this sort of alignment within the Players Association when it comes to all of this. Maybe there is. Like I have no knowledge about this, but if you think about it, right, and you start to drill into it, you could see the superstars saying, "Listen, we're not budging on this." Right? The guys who are making
Right.
30, 40, 50
Well,
million
Josh, did you
dollars.
tell the story about the Bryce Harper and the baseball bat
Yeah.
shaking into the guy's head?
Yeah.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know,
And
okay,
I
so
think
so
Bryce
Bryce is going to
Harper
come out strong. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Bryce Harper was able to do that. Like a guy who's a fringe guy isn't going to go to Rob Manfred and shake a bat in his face because he's not going to have a job,
Right.
right? And those guys are going to be like, "Excuse me, um, you know, I'm like hanging on by a thread here, and I've got a family, and I've, you know, like if you take the average Major League Baseball salary. It's not that they're hurting for cash, but but they're not making, there are a lot of guys in those early contracts that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe a million or two, right? The overall salaries get skewed by the big numbers. But the
Yeah.
point is that if those guys go without, like that's going to hurt them. And I just think that what feels very necessary to me is that, and I think the only way that you get out of this is you think differently about it. And I've seen some interesting conversations and proposals about, just the idea of shifting from like a hard cap to a luxury tax escalator with like an enforcement of a floor, right? So that the
Yeah.
luxury tax just gets higher and higher the more you spend. Um, but like other ways of thinking about it as well, like, there are a whole bunch of things about arbitration eligibility and things like that. Well,
Yeah.
it could be that service time isn't just about years, but it could be based on statistics,
Right.
right?
So
Like
so here's
things
the other
like that.
thing. There's the model that says we're different, so let's invent our own model. Got it.
Hmm.
But there's also that old steal shamelessly. Go look at what is the most successful model on the planet,
Hmm.
and then do as much of it as makes sense for you, or take the whole
Yeah,
model.
right.
Um, but then ego gets into play, and everybody thinks they can, do it differently and do it better. But if it were me and you just wanted to get to a quick answer, I would go look at the NFL. I would say, well, what did they do? And let's just do it as good or better than them,
Hmm.
and not have all this kerfuffle about the stuff. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. If Gavin Newsom says, "Hey, California wants to play the peacemaker because we've got all these teams out here in California," well,
Hmm.
then you know who's going to come in over the top of Newsom.
Hmm. Sure.
And maybe that is what's required. Maybe the commissioner is supposed to look out for all of baseball. Really, it's in the pocket of the owners. Maybe somebody has to come in over the top and say, "Look, everybody's got to play nicely. You're all coming to Camp David. You're all coming to the White House ballroom, whatever."
Yeah.
And we're going to bang this deal out because he does want to be seen as a deal maker.
Yeah, but
I
here's
don't
the
think,
thing. Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go
I
ahead,
don't,
Jerry.
where, I don't know. I'm not as optimistic as you guys. I think there's a lockout coming unless, the players, they can expand the pie, but I see a lockout coming. And the reason I do is I think the owners, they're sitting on these franchises that continue to increase in value. And I can't see that a lockout's going to decrease the value of a franchise, certainly not in the short term. So I think that the owners will probably say, hey, I'm sitting on this gold mine. It's probably just going to continue to increase in value. So that'll make them more entrenched in their position. Whether that's correct or not, I think that'll be the prevailing thought in the owner's mind.
Well, there is always another Bezos, Musk, the next 100 billionaire who wants in, and there's only 32 teams. Restricting supply. Woo, even if viewership is down, it's being in the club that matters to the ego.
I mean, I hate to say it, but like we all know that if people are taking a position and unwilling to move, then you have to be thinking, well, you have to be thinking BATNA here, right? And even though, and to your point, Gerry, even though, even though like the owners will lose, it's a lose-lose scenario, right? But the reality is that if the players simply say, we're not doing that, then, you're not really leaving the owners with much choice than to say, you know what, I guess we have to lock these guys out to send the message that like rigidity isn't going to get any of us anywhere.
Right.
Right. Like, and so it's never preferable, but like when you're dealing with, really tough negotiators who are unwilling to move, it's the tool that you have to try to figure out, okay, well, let's see how serious you really are about this. And it may be that you have to go, there's the old adage, don't be afraid to walk away from the table. And maybe that's what's necessary here to get the sides to say, okay, look, neither one of us really wants what the other's offering up. Like maybe we need to try to do this differently or think about how to come at this problem, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it's just, that the shock of a lockout or something like that gets people to be a little bit more reasonable in their orientation.
And I hope that's what happens.
Right. So there's a phrase that I learned from my boss, Bill Garcia. And when you are walking away, because walking away can harm a relationship and it can be rigid in its own right. To say to the other side, I'm not walking away. You're pushing me away. And that leaves the side door for them to say, yeah, go on, get the hell out of here. Or no, I'm not really pushing you away, but at least you're still talking as you're saying, goodbye, I love you, I really don't want to do this. But I don't have a choice because of your actions.
Very wise.
Brings things.
I think it's an interesting way of framing it, right? And I think either side is going to, and there's already been a PR, battle that's been going on here about this, and each trying to paint the other as unreasonable. And again, we're back to rule number one in negotiation, which is stop doing this in public. Like all you're doing is making your life harder. Like get in a room. If you really want to work this through, it's not going to be easy. None of us have a magic solution, but if you begin to think differently, and there's a commitment that says, hey, like this needs to be good for the owners, for the players, and for baseball writ large. Which means the fans, it means the businesses, it means everybody that's touched by it.
And there's so many dollars outside of the game, of the league. Players, look at Caitlin Clark. I mean, God bless her. What has she got? $38 million in endorsements outside the WNBA. Yeah. She does not need them at all. She does need them to keep her name relevant, but she's making way more money outside. She doesn't need their paycheck. And to wrap it up, because I've been following a little bit closely with the WNBA stuff.
Yeah.
From a league perspective, if you're Caitlin Clark and you have that much leverage, what's to prevent her from saying, hey, listen, you guys really need me. I got this other contract. They want me to go play with the guys, the 3-point thing. Or I don't need you at all. I've got $38 million in the bank after 1 or 2 years. And I don't need to play. So I need for you to give me ownership in a team. I mean, there's very few players. Tom Brady probably didn't have that. And he still wound up with 10% of the Raiders. WNBA much weaker than the NFL. Caitlin Clark, as big a player as they've ever had. She's their Magic Johnson, Larry Bird equivalent.
Yeah.
There could be some future negotiations there. Listen, I want to wrap it up because I know, Jerry, you got to take off.
Yeah,
Can I say one quick thing about that, Mike?
Yeah, please.
The best businesses that I've worked with over the years, from a training and coaching and whatever kind of thing, from in negotiation, dealing with conflict, whatever it is, are employee-owned businesses, because people have a stake in the deal, right? So what if, in a crazy way, what if the owner said, "Hey, let's give the players a stake, like a small stake, like you're not going to be a majority owner, but like if the team succeeds and the value of the team, like you get shares in the team, right?"
Okay. How do you deal with free agency coming in and out, and end of career and beginning of career? Sure, there's a math equation. The actuaries
maybe it's a buy and sell it like a stock, or if you get traded and leave, then you automatically, it triggers, you get bought out.
Okay.
Something like that. In other words, look, bottom line is I don't know how that would work, right? But that's the kind of way in which you might be able to think about this differently, right? And if
I like
players
it.
are like,
I like it.
I'm a part owner of the San Diego Padres, meaning I care about this organization. I'm going to work really hard. I have a vested interest in it succeeding, blah, blah, blah. If I get traded, all that stuff gets cashed in, and whatever. I don't know, again, like there's always a way to do this. The question is, can you get out of the sort of, we want to cap, we don't want to cap, right? And into something better and different that says, what are you trying to do here? If you can create a scenario where all boats rise,
Right.
everybody wins. And I think that's where the NFL has done well. And, if somebody came to me and said, "Okay, Mr. Smarty Pants Negotiator, what would you do?" I would say, like, let's start thinking like way outside the box here.
Yeah. Collaborate to
Yeah.
create value, and then you claim value.
Right.
Right. But you got to collaborate to create on the first end before you get to claim value on the back end.
And there's a lot of value to go around. I would make that argument, to your point, right? Like, this is why, and we'll stop because I know we need to, but like when the Red Sox don't invest in the team, I'm like, you guys are being stupid, because when this team is playing well, Fenway Park gets banged out every night. You're selling a ton of merchandise. It makes up for itself.
I just bought a Sophie Cunningham shirt because I like her in the like.
There you go.
How about that? Like, there's ways to make money outside the game.
That's it. You got it.
All right, listen, guys. Thank you very much for your time. We'll wrap it up now. Thanks to the listening audience, and we'll see you on next week or 2 weeks.
All right, take it easy, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye now.
Bye. See you.